Good evening. For those of you that are joining us for the second hour, A World Awakening follows Soul School on KGR right now every Friday night from 9 to 11. The last hour was spent talking about the process that's involved with long-term caregiving, even short-term. I mean, who's to say time is irrelevant? Pain is pain, grief is grief. Uh, I always say in Soul School, which I perceive to be here on this plane of action, Earth now, um, the test precedes the lesson. And so we talked in the last hour about that lesson and the lessons learned. You know, Caregiving at its most intense is not a full-time job. It is a all-the-time job, and it will test your patience. It's a challenge beyond anything that you've probably ever experienced in your life before. It will test your resolve. It will test your personal strength, not just your physical strength, but your emotional strength, and your ability to withstand and endure what will probably be the most painful process that you ever experience in your lifetime. Letting go of, particularly in my case, uh, the woman who gave me life, that, is something that all humanity shares. I think it's probably why it's part of the plan of this thing called life and then death, which we will all inevitably face as we make our spiritual ascension and go through that metamorphosis where we all hope we will be reunited. But that's not written in stone or gold tablets anywhere, that we will see each other again. We have faith that we will. We hope that we will. But the only thing that we know that we have in that given moment is this relationship right now in the present. And what are we doing to externalize the essential internal and eternal love that we have for our parents? I've often felt sad for people who have told me that um, they don't have a good, solid relationship with their parents. And as Bill and I discussed in the last hour, um, it's something to think about in terms of making amends, no matter what the rift, no matter what the difference is, because nothing is guaranteed. We have only this moment. And I know that not if, but when my mother leaves me, there will be nothing left unsaid between us. We're there now. There is nothing left unsaid between us. And I know that at some point that's going to bring me great comfort. But as I began the last hour, I talked about, caring for oneself and maintaining one's own level of mental health and how everything is energy. And um, that's why my guest tonight is the lovely Erin Bush. And we are going to, you're used to seeing her on the show when I can't be here. She is my guest host, but tonight she is my guest. And what we are going to talk about tonight is going to be intense, and just be prepared to delve deep into your own psyche, your own human emotions, as we go through this hour. So without further ado, Bill, if you would be so kind, there she is, the
Hello.
lovely Erin.
How are
And
ya?
hi, darling. Oh, you look so good in white. It's so
Oh,
angelic
thanks.
and stuff. Yeah. Oh, I know. Your mother gave you that shirt.
No, I think I got it at Old Navy. It's like a real light blue. It was like buried
Uh,
in the back of my closet. And I'm like, oh, that'll be nice. It's springtime.
it is. It is springtime. And I also want to remind everyone that, Erin is an energy worker. She's a light keeper. She's um, a practitioner of the light. And so it is, as we explore the notion of this higher frequency of high anxiety that we're feeling in the world, particularly at this stage, let's let us not forget that we are squarely in the midst of the paradigm shift, and there
Right.
are things that we need to discuss. So anybody that's in a chat room or has something to add to the discourse or the conversation, please seek out Bill, but particularly Linny. And I'm going to put her right now on my phone and bring her up so that if she gets a question, she can, pop that through to me, and we can address that as well, sweetheart. And thank you for joining me tonight. I think that what we are going to discuss is supremely important. And, I spoke with you earlier today. And the reason that I think that we should address this with our viewers is because we're not the only ones struggling. The test,
Right.
we're all being tested in myriad ways right now. We are all being tested. And some of us are carrying more than others, but all of us are affected. All of us are. If we're
Yes.
conscious, we're affected.
Yes.
And the reason that I wanted to approach this subject tonight is not only to follow through on what Soul School was about in terms of self-monitoring,
Right.
your own emotional well-being, uh, just, checking in with yourself every day. You know how you check in with me every day? I check in with myself every day.
Right.
I do take, even if it's just 10 minutes, to go outside and breathe the fresh air and, watch the rose bush quietly, peacefully bloom all on its own, regardless of whether anyone is admiring its blossoms or not. It
Right. And it is
exists,
beautiful.
and it is beautiful. And so I will just take those few minutes away from what sometimes feels like a chaotic kind of pressure cooker environment. You've been here, you see what's going on,
Yes, ma'am.
Linny has been through this with her mom. We've many friends. Between us, we have many friends who are
We do.
going through this period of time right now where we are giving of ourselves and caring for those we love.
Yes.
And for me, I have to look at it as a great opportunity. I would be devastated if I was not available, if I lived on the other side of the world, if I wasn't in a position where I could drop everything and come running, would be
Right.
devastating to me. And I would feel in the final analysis like I had somehow failed in my role to go full circle in terms of my mother caring for me as an infant and me caring for her the way that I do as an elderly person.
Right.
But a lot of people that are in this situation start to feel a breakdown or start to question their own mental health.
Yes.
And Chris and I were watching what you so so successfully avoid the news. Um, that's all right. You've got me. You don't have to watch the news. I tell you
I
everything.
can't keep you
No,
standing upright if I watch that shit all the
I
time.
know. So, but we were watching the news, and of course, it's really hard to keep up with the mass shootings. Um, and I was like, okay, which one? Oh yeah, it was the one in not Nashville, but Louisville,
Right.
Kentucky. And normally when normally, like that's a word that in any way applies to what's
Right.
going on.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it is
It
being
does,
normalized, and we are
sadly.
becoming inured to the violence, and we are becoming, less. We're becoming uncomfortably numb to it. But we were
Yeah.
sitting here, and let me just say, usually when someone who is a mass murderer is actually apprehended rather than killed by their own hand or by whoever is attempting to apprehend them and stop the carnage, um, and they end up in jail, and you see the mug shot, you see the crazy in their eyes, you see
Or
it,
the
you can
dead,
see
or
it.
it's just dead. It's
Or
just
yes, or
nothing.
like shark eyes. Yeah, you'll see it.
Correct. One of the
And
two, usually.
yeah, usually.
Yeah.
Um, in fact, I can't remember a time that I ever thought, "Oh, I would never have thought that this individual would be capable of this." But that just happened. And it was the
It
young
did.
man who went into the bank where he worked, planning on being a casualty of his own rampage, and took 5 people with him. It might be more. Not everybody's out of the hospital. The police officer that he shot in the head is still in critical condition. We don't know if he will
Right.
survive. Um, and when they put up a picture of him on the news, I looked, I was sitting right beside Chris, and I said, "Look at his face. Would you ever mistake him as a mass murderer?" Well, I mean, would you ever conceive that this perfectly normal looking guy who was a banker, who had a good job and apparently, was friendly, very friendly with all the people that he worked with, would snap and go on this heinous
Rampage. Massacre. Yeah.
massacre, heinous massacre,
Yeah.
you know, and it's like the pressure that builds up at the bottom of a volcano, and
Yes.
the earth might start to rumble a little bit around the volcano, but it might be so slight that it would take a very sensitive instrument to even measure it, to
Mhm.
forewarn you that something was coming. And the pressure builds and it builds and it builds. And then the
Boom.
pyroclastic flow erupts. And in that eruption flows just a billion shards of stone, and stone that's literally been pulverized into glass, and it's lava, and it's
Yeah.
spewing all over outside of this volcano. Except that when a human being does this, those flying embers are all too often bullets that were deliberately designed to virtually pulverize and liquefy the internal organs of another
Yep.
human being, so that they have, if hit properly, struck properly, have no chance of
No.
surviving the wound.
No.
Um, and, you know, I'm not going to make this show about the military weaponry that is, so easily procured. Uh, we're not going to talk about that tonight because it's redundant. We all know what the
Yeah.
problem is.
Yeah.
Everybody's on one side of the issue or another. A gun can't kill you unless a person pulls the trigger. Yada yada yada. Go
Yeah.
NRA. Whatever. Everybody who knows me knows how I feel about this. If
Right.
I had if I had my wish, I would be a magical fairy princess and queen of the alternate universe. And I would just wave my wand and wipe all weapons off the planet, wipe all the pestilence off the planet, those that use these weapons to, the scorched earth policy of
Yeah.
Ukraine, um, I would make it all disappear, but I cannot. And that's not the world that we live in.
Sadly, no, it's not.
So what we need to do is find a way to, in the midst of the chaos and the bedlam and, the heinous crimes against humanity that happen with such frequency that we can barely stand to even feel it anymore.
Yeah.
And I think that what we should do is talk about the way to maintain or to reclaim your mental health after
Yeah.
doing something as seemingly innocuous as watching an evening news broadcast that can leave you with a frequency that's vibrating with such high anxiety that it's literally having an adverse effect on your physiology.
Yep.
And so
Yep.
what you do is, help people that are being tested, that are living through the trials and tribulations, the trying times of their life, that feel like they need to reestablish their equilibrium, to find, true north, to get centered, to get balanced, to and you do that with Reiki, and you do that, with a wide variety of, I admire what you do. I know you consider yourself a conduit. I am as well. I know that I am. Um, and I have healing properties in me that I've
Oh
been
yeah.
told too many times, um, that just wrapping somebody in my arms can be a very healing. They burst into tears out of
Oh
nowhere,
yeah.
you
I've
know?
seen it.
Yeah. And
In
so,
some cases, they almost fall downstairs in haunted houses. We've seen that too. So
yes,
yeah.
yes, and that too. But you have there's a method to your white lightness, and as there is a method to mine, and it's really all one and the same thing. And
Yep.
so I think that the real message here, that we will leave people with, at the end of this show tonight, is finding their own path to their own peace,
Yeah.
and to the center of the stillness of their being, where they can reclaim their sanity, because in the process of cleansing your mind of all of the madness, you can start to feel like you're losing your mind. You
Oh
know,
yeah.
I had I'm not going to use any names, even though it's to someone that you know. But I had a conversation with a very close friend today that we both mutually know. And she has a son who I have not met, but I already pre love and adore him. And she told me today that he's 31. He's about as like-minded with us and our circle, our tribe,
Hmm.
as it gets. And he came to see her and he said, "Mom, um, I feel like things aren't ever going to get any better."
Yeah.
And she said it was the first time she ever sensed hopelessness in her supremely optimistic son.
Oh
And it
yeah.
terrified her. It terrified her that if someone who was that tuned in and turned on to life and so focused on making the world a better place was able to sit back and look at all of it and say, this might be as good as it gets.
Right.
Feeling every bit of the paradigm shift as everything seems to shift underneath us and throw us off balance. And we don't know when we're going to topple. And we don't know how far we will fall if we do.
Yes.
And we're constantly hanging with our fingernails on the precipice, trying not to go into the pit of despair.
Yep.
Than to say that not just in our own country, but worldwide, to say that humanity is in the midst of a mental health crisis is not an overstatement,
No.
and in fact might qualify as an understatement, because when
Yes.
I looked into that young man's eyes, I saw someone who I would have happily walked up to in that bank and introduced myself and said good morning. There was almost like light around him, and
Hmm.
yet he was in a space so dark that he had to leave because he was lost, and so selfish that he had to take how many innocent lives in the
Yeah.
process of making his exit.
Yeah.
We have a mental health crisis that is affecting people from
Everyone.
every walk
Everyone.
of life. And a
Yeah.
lot of it, I think, has to do with, I mean, let's look at this. We've dealt with a global pandemic. We've dealt with political upheaval. We're dealing with a war in Western Europe, the likes of which we have not seen since World War II and Nazi occupation. We
Yep.
are all dealing with the price of everything seems to have doubled, and
Yep.
we're all fighting to keep a roof over our heads and food on the table to some extent or another. Making decisions at the grocery store. Do I really need that? No, hell no, I'm not paying that for, and it's the minutia, and it's the bombardment of the stimuli that's coming at us from virtually every corner of our existence that is overwhelmed. And that we're overwhelmed. And when I
Yeah.
spoke to you
Absolutely.
earlier today, this is something that I want you to address while I drink my coffee. I will have to lean out.
Does this look
Of,
familiar?
yes, it does. I know that mug. Um,
Most of my coffee mugs somehow strangely are from your house.
I know that's true. Well, because you love coffee. It
I
is the
do.
nature of the gods. It
It
is.
is.
Um, but what I want you to do is talk about what we talked about privately earlier
Yeah.
today, which is reaching the extent of our bandwidth, what we are able to, energetically tolerate,
Right.
and what happens when it goes above and beyond that. So address
Yeah.
that as I lean over, kiss Peanut Butter Cup, and grab my coffee that I accidentally left on the other side of the sofa.
Grab your Kleenex too, just in case, and kiss your dog for
Okay.
me.
All right. I will.
Yeah, we've talked about this quite a bit, and I talk with this about this with my clients often, because I have people coming to me who don't even know why they're coming to me. They are stressed out, overworked, underpaid, exhausted. They've had death, grief, sadness, pain. Collectively, the planet is in such upheaval. And I think a lot of where the problem lies is that we're not taught how energy affects us as individuals. About the extent of our
Right.
learning of energy is fossil fuels, right? But if you look at, I always try to explain to people I work with as energy as like your personal bandwidth, right? So we know when you're on a computer,
Yes.
like take Disney World, for example, right?
Yes.
You're on your cell phone and you have tens of thousands of people all in the same place, your bandwidth runs out. So nobody can make a call. You can't
Right.
get any calls in, text messages, nothing. Nothing's going
Communication
in.
pieces. Yes.
Yep, done. And I think for humans, our energy is that way, right? So especially if you take the last 3 years,
Hmm.
all those things you mentioned, all the terrible things that we've been experiencing on a global level, you factor
Especially,
that in.
but for us personally, especially, I think isolation. You
Well, I
know,
was about to say, yeah, you
yep,
have how those things affected us on a global scale as individuals, but then also the cost of having to deal with it as humans, right? Because there's a lot of us who, like when quarantine kicked in,
yeah.
as an energetic sensitive, that's like a dream come true. Like I could stay in quarantine forever, which is
Yeah,
terrible to say,
I know, but me
but
too. I was in the same place. It's like I get to stay home.
yeah,
I
I
don't.
don't have to put on a bra today. This is great. But it's like, for me, it was,
I know that
I've always
feeling.
worked in, yeah, that lack of filter.
Hmm.
But I've always worked in jobs where it was incredibly high stress all the time. You know, things are on fire, everything's on fire. And when I had some time to step away from it, I was able to kind of like reset my central nervous system. I started making choices to protect my energy. I stopped watching the news. I don't surround myself with people who cause me massive amounts of stress, chaos, and grief. I started understanding the effect that the energy and the environment around me,
Was
how
having on
closely
you.
tied that is to your
Yep.
mental health, right? Because if you don't know from an energetic standpoint how all these things are affecting you, then to your point, you don't know when you're going to topple, because
Right.
all of a sudden you're just absolutely, pardon my French, fucking done, right?
Well,
You don't
that's
really
the
know why.
scariest. Yeah, that's the
And that's
scariest
the
part of all.
scariest part.
Yep.
And for people, and I know they're starting to teach more mindfulness in schools, and that's amazing. That's a great first step. But energy and its effects on humans also needs to be discussed, because what I try to teach people is that you're filled up, right? And when you're full up, most people are sad, they're upset, they're not in a good place when they're coming to somebody like me, right? But once they start to understand the effects that energy has, and we start clearing away some of that stuff with energy work, they
Shed
can
it.
breathe again.
Yeah.
Yep. And then, things start to line up for them. Whether that's, family situations or things they were dealing with at work, or their pain starts decreasing, because we're now creating space for their personal bandwidth of energy to be able to start taking in the good and putting out the good. But people are so full right now of the negative, stale bullshit we've been dealing with for the last 3 years on any level, whether it's personal or globally. They don't know what to do because they don't understand what's happening to them. I think that's half the problem. So then you start having people just acting completely irrationally. We've seen even stuff in the news involving certain celebrities, where a certain celebrity slapped another celebrity. That is not something normally he would have done, right? I'm not taking a stance on that particular incident, but to me, it was a good example of a person who's always kind of held themselves in publicly and very well.
Yeah, very well.
And then it just like flies off the handle. And I've seen that so often. And it's like people don't understand that's what's happening, I think, on a lot of levels. Now, mental illness is mental illness. You have chemical imbalances in the brain. You have, that's what I think talk therapy and all these different kinds of therapy that are available to people, and different medications and things like that. But if you teach someone about energy on top of the things they're already doing, it allows them to start understanding that they're really in control of all of it. So much of this panic, I think, is a feeling of absolute lack of control.
Absolute lack of control. And because they cannot in any way control the macrocosm environment,
Right.
they hone in on the microcosmic elements of, and the littlest thing can set them off.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yes.
look what happened with, the airlines and people having to wear masks and them losing their shit and throwing their lives away, ending up in jail because they couldn't control their temper, because a flight attendant had the temerity to ask them to follow the rules at the time, which was to put a mask on their face so that they could protect themselves and others from anything they might be carrying. Common sense solution when you're packing people into a vessel like sardines, and yet boom, gone. And throw it away and land the plane and off you go to jail. And I don't even want to know what the fines for that are.
Oh God.
The road rage incidents,
all of it.
The one mass shooting after another, 143 mass shootings in the United States alone.
It's
in
insane.
The first 100 days of the year.
Yeah.
And
we're, like you said, we're at the point now where that's a Thursday, right? That's the other issue. We're becoming and that's part of the reason. I don't know if everyone's this way. I choose not. I obviously I get a lot of I still check headlines. I mean, I'm not completely oblivious to the news, but I just I don't put any energy to it anymore unless there's something crazy going on that I need to pay attention to. because I understand if I've got enough going on in my own life and I'm trying to manage that, I can easily choose the things in my external energy field to tune out to help me kind of keep my energy sort of leveled. But if you don't know that,
if
you don't know that, if you don't know, you don't know.
Right.
And so when I work with people, I think at some point along this journey, the light bulb goes off about the effects. And you know, people are so reactive and they're flying off the handle. And the more you start clearing out that energetic shit that's in your field that's stuck and stale that you don't need, you start to learn that there's this little space. And I had to learn this because I was very much a reactive personality. I'm Irish. I have complex post-traumatic stress from my first marriage. Like I am the poster child for flipping your shit. So, but as I started doing this stuff and understanding energy, I started realizing there is a space where I get to decide how I'm going to react. And I will give myself like 5 seconds before I react to anything most of the time. Not perfect, work in progress, but to try and get a different perspective. Like, do I really need to flip my shit over this? Like, is that really what my problem is? Or is it?
And what will it solve?
What else?
What
nothing.
will it
Absolutely
you just
nothing.
be blowing off steam and shedding all this negative energy all over the people around you.
Yes.
Like my father has a tendency to do from time to time. We all know people
but that's
that are hyper reactive, hyper vigilant and hyper reactive and quick to anger.
Yep.
Interestingly, my father has actually mellowed because he's literally like thrown his hands in the air. Like, you know, I there's nothing I can do here. You know, I mean, he's really actually mellowed rather than, and yet people that I've known that are usually pretty mellow have started to resemble more what he used to be. And so it's an interesting thing to, you know, study in kind of a cerebral examination of human emotions and how we can actually manipulate our own emotions and even let ourselves be in dark space temporarily and then, you know, and then pull ourselves out. I think it's the people who are so reclusive, so isolated, so insulated, so the ones that have a tendency to bury these feelings rather than process them. It's that pressure that builds and builds and builds volcanically under the crust of their earth vessel that eventually explodes. It erupts on its own, and they don't even know when it's coming, and they can't control it because
I was that person for a lot of years.
Yep. I know.
There wasn't any amount of,
you know, when I met you, I would never have known that about you. You had already done so much of your own work.
I had to. I was at the place where I am getting people now coming to me, right? So, you know, I think what I love about what I get to do is that I get to give back what was given to me in the first place, right? And the guest I had on when you were in Ohio was my first mentor was Catherine, and she changed my life. She's the one who started all this for me. And I had gotten to the point where I was so miserable, right? I had overcome the trauma of the marriage and some other stuff. And I had, you know, all the abuse and all that crap. But then I'm married to a nice man. I have a wonderful little condo by the beach. I live in St. Augustine. I had a great job. I was miserable.
He's really easy on the eyes too. I just got, you know, not for nothing. I just got to say,
he's very handsome.
Dead gorgeous husband you have. Okay.
Lucky me, right?
Yeah.
So, but I couldn't figure it out, and I had. It works both ways. But you know, and I got sober. You know, again, I think the amount of increase in people's drinking or drug of choice,
self-medication,
it's a way to cope with the energy that's coming in. Right. I used to think that the bulk of my drinking was because of my first marriage, but what I have since figured out is because I wasn't really so much an at-home drinker, right? Like I was a go out, I could stay out till 3 or 4 in the morning. I was gonna out drink everyone there. But it wasn't because of anything else other than if I was out in public, I'm absorbing all this stuff like a sponge and I didn't know it. And so I'm just shot, you know, to cope with what I now understand is the energy that was being thrown around in a room.
Well,
and I
the
think what's so
escapism into drugs and alcohol, which has burgeoned. I remember
yeah.
a few months ago we talked about. I think it was an Ipsos poll,
Mhm.
which was done nationally, and they asked, if have you considered self harm in the
Mhm.
last 2 months, and the numbers on
Astounding.
teenagers to like 30, staggering. Over 25, 1 in 4
I'm
of
not
people
surprised.
in that demographic had considered harming themselves or taking their own lives in the
Yep.
last year.
And I think what's so
Oh my God.
what's astounding to me too, because I've at this point I've worked with some younger, teenage clients at this point, and I can't imagine trying to navigate being a teenager in this world. But well, being human in this world at this point is a struggle. But I think too, what's so astounding to me is the tools that I have people try, because I don't really have any rules. Well, my one rule: drink water after a session. That's really it. But
Yeah.
none of the things I'm asking people to try is rocket science.
Yeah.
It's learning to connect with that energy. It's learning to identify, what can, like, I always look at it as I want to be the center of calm when the tornado is just
Yeah.
around me, right?
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time in the tornado,
Mhm.
right? I created my own tornado for a lot of years, but now I get the opportunity to be in the center of it in a calm fashion
Yeah.
most of the
In the
time.
eye of the storm as it's happening all around you.
Because we hold the power there. We get to
Right.
decide all of that.
Yeah, but I also get to decide, and we all get to decide when we are going to be the storm.
Oh, yes,
We are spiritual warriors, and there
we
are
are.
things in this world worth fighting for. And
Completely
so
agree.
I have to, and very often with your help, try to establish that balance
Yeah.
between.
It's hard.
It is because I'm angry a lot. I never
Mhm.
used to be that way. I used to be like so mellow and so, really positive and really happy a lot.
Yeah.
And that's not true anymore because I see what's worth fighting for. And for me, silence is tacit approval.
Yeah.
If I don't speak
Yeah.
up, if I don't march, if I don't get out there and make my presence known on issues that are of import to me, then
Yeah.
it's a failure on my part. It's like
Oh,
saying,
yeah.
it's okay. It's, how it, whatever is, let it be, just let it explode. It's fine. So one of the things that I really wanted to talk to you about tonight was, the entirely counterintuitive notion that, we talk about energy and frequency,
Mhm.
and being on a wavelength that we can ride on treacherous waters and not succumb to the tumultuous, not
Yeah.
drown in the turbulence of
Yeah.
these waters that we navigate on the river of life, and try not to swim against the current and exhaust ourselves and drown, but to
Yeah.
learn when you're at that point that you don't have any strength left, you better use what strength you have left to flip over and float
Yep.
and just let the current carry you for a while so that you can re-energize. And one of the things that I've talked with you about, and Sheena Metal a lot too on her show, is the notion. I mean, she's got a show called Raising the Vibration, and
Mhm.
I think that the vibration is extremely high on planet Earth right now, but it is not the kind of vibration that we seek
Yeah.
to ascend into, third out of 3D through fourth into fifth and beyond, where, we see the big picture and
Yeah.
we can meld and amalgamate with it. I think what's happening instead is that the vibration is so critically high because of fear being
It's like
becoming
TV static.
right, exactly.
Zzz. Yeah.
And so ideally, we say we need to raise the vibration. Maybe at this point in the paradigm shift, we need to all consciously start thinking in terms of lowering the vibration of fear and raising the vibration of light, you
Yes.
know, because fear is darkness. Fear is the pit of despair. Fear is debilitating.
Yeah.
Fear
It's exhausting.
can exhaust you and can ultimately claim your life if you
Yep.
become so fearful that you become paranoid, you become delusional, you become a danger to yourself and others, and then ultimately you lose the battle and the war and life itself. I
Yep.
look at this kid, 21 years old, who was so lonely that he got into a chat room with 30 other, basically teenage boys,
Teenagers. Right.
and he needed to be big man on campus. And because of that internal yearning for some kind of attention and notoriety and status, because he felt like nothing at all, in spite of the fact that he had a good, responsible job within our own military establishment, where he could have risen to the very top of his game, starting where he was as an IT specialist at 21 years old,
Yep.
and threw it all away, all of it, to be big
Yeah.
man on campus in a little tiny chat room.
We're so disconnected um, from our bodies, which sounds like a weird thing to say in this discussion,
But we
but
are.
so much of what the power of the energy that we have available to us is in the body. And you have to find, that's why we talk about grounding your energy, grounding your energy, grounding your energy. That's really also just getting back into your body. And I think when you start getting so disconnected from that, and then everyone and everything else, and it's like that hyper focus on whether it's fame or it's whatever the reason is that people choose to make this decision, they're so disconnected from everything. There's
Including reality.
reality, and it's, I think, really for a lot of these people, it's as for most of us, it's a defense mechanism.
Yeah, it is.
Survivors of trauma, we have to learn to stop disassociating all of the time. It's easier to your body you just check out because that's how you survive, right?
Dissociative behavior. Having worked in the mental health field myself with
Yep.
adolescent males for a decade of my life, I see the warning signs. What
Yeah.
freaked me out was that I didn't see any warning signs in the shooter. I looked at his
Yeah.
aura. I looked in his eyes. I looked at his face. I saw calm. I saw sedate, kind of somber, kind of, a lot of what I was talking about in the earlier hour about
Yeah.
all the myriad emotions that one goes through in caregiving. You have to give of yourself and give of yourself, and you better have something of substance to draw upon to
Yeah.
do that. And he appeared as a person of some and substance, had a good job, was on the right track in life, had a good home. What possessed him to go buy an AK-15 and blow away his coworkers a few days later when his
But
own mother didn't even know that he owned a gun? I
we're
mean,
also
it's mind blowing.
mind-blowing. It is. But again, like I've talked to when I was home last weekend, and we were talking about, world events just in general. And we were talking about the stabbing down here of the 13-year-old girl in our county.
Yep.
And then the Murdaugh thing. We talking about this. I'm like, listen, we're trying to rationalize acts by people who at that point are irrational. And those two things are never going to make sense to those of us who aren't there, right? That's a lonely, scary place to live. I've been there. I mean, after my marriage, it took me 16 years to put my life back together on some semblance of normalcy. And I carried that by myself, by my own choice. But we have to figure out a way to let a lot of this stuff go energetically. And I'm not saying like, oh, love, peace, love, light, and unicorns, because let's call it what is. That's bullshit.
Is.
It's, what do they call it? Toxic spirituality, where everything, you can fix everything with meditation.
Fairyland, magical thinking spirituality. It's not reality as it really exists in our 3D realm. It's just not.
And this work is really, really fucking hard, because at the crux of this stuff, when people are coming for help and they're trying to figure out what the hell's going on, the hardest part, after you kind of deal with, some of the things in your life that you identify as trauma, but having to pull those worst parts of yourself out.
Yes.
Your coping skills, your shitty, the bad things you've done in life, whatever that looks like, whatever your history looks like, and holding those in your hands and learning to love them too, because those unfortunately and fortunately are the things that helped you survive.
Right. And
but you have to catch it.
That you are now. Every single thing, good, bad, or otherwise, however we choose to label it. Correct. This, vast recipe where you're pouring the next experience in and the next experience into the bowl, and you mix it all up, and you have this present moment now, who you are, me, who I am now, based on that entire history. And so, those of us that will, curse ourselves and feel like we have, just failed at being a good human being, rather than striving to be a better human being based on what we've learned in our lessons after the tests were presented to us.
Yeah. Because you're trying to help someone hopefully be able to get some of the questions first before, you know what I'm saying? Like a study guide before the, the test hits.
Yeah.
But none of us are getting out of this alive.
Anything to help. But, one of the things that I don't know if you're even aware that you offer to people and that I offer to people that we engage with is a sense of camaraderie and belonging and understanding and compassion that is all too often just very elusive. You offer somebody not just your ability to help them heal energetically, you offer them an ear, and you are attentively listening, and you might be the only person in years who has heard and acknowledged what that individual is going through. And that in its own right is a healing endeavor.
Because you've done it. You've dealt with it. Now your traumas and your issues and your life experience may be completely different, but you're seeking the same answers, even if you don't know what the questions are yet. And so to me, it's an honor to be able to do it, but it's something I'm obligated. It's not the right word, but it's something that if I don't do it, then I'm not doing this particular road trip in this particular meat suit any justice. Like, this is what I'm supposed to do. I owe it to the people I can help because I've learned. I've done it myself, and I'm still learning. It never stops.
It never does. It never does.
There's people who,
every moment that we spend in soul school is part of our own awakening in a world that offers more challenges than anything, more obstacles than anything, more trials and tribulations than anything. So I remember when I put the two shows kind of, holding hands side by side, back to back. And I remember I had texted you and I said, okay, this is what I'm doing. And this is what I got back from you. All caps. Brilliant. Remember? Almost British. Brilliant. But
you're a person too. I mean, you've had to learn. I think we only have like 2 minutes left.
We only have like 2 minutes.
You give and give and give and give, right? And there's a lot of us who do that. and like you had said earlier, to the extent of your own mental health, your own physical health.
Yeah.
And it's finding that balance.
It is.
It's hard, but it's doable.
It is doable. And just by having this discussion tonight and just sharing our positive, uplifting energy between each other with our viewers tonight, I want everybody that spent this last hour or two with us to feel better about themselves in context with a world gone haywire. Because until we each individually establish or reestablish true north in our own moral, psychological, spiritual compass, by doing so, we're helping to heal the world. By taking care of ourselves and those around us, we're helping to heal the world and lift it out of a woeful situation that does at times seem hopeless. And so, as I often say, we're the ones we've been waiting for. You know, be the light you seek, because it's the only way to find the path in the darkness as we link hands and follow each other out of the woods, knowing that there is a better place, and that better place isn't necessarily, you know, in death. It can be right here in life and can be right here in peace.
Yep. And
so peace, be still, and just know that every ounce of love that you put out into the world helps lift up all of humanity simultaneously. It is incalculable. It is immeasurable. You and I both know that the only true measure of love is the corresponding level of grief that occurs with the loss. It is all part of the circle of life and the nature of human existence. And when we spend our time having conversations like this, that other people might hear in their heads, but more so feel in their hearts, then we are doing our part to help heal the world.
Yes,
and you know, we needed more time than this, so we'll, you know, very soon we'll just pick up where we left off.
Say tomorrow around 10 a.m. probably.
Yeah, probably about that. Yeah, coffee talk. Coffee talk. But you know, with that said, I know we're running out of time here, and I want to acknowledge you personally for all that you do, for the paradigm shift that you have been in my life.
Well, thank you. It's an honor.
You know, it is. I mean, I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful that we found each other and that you are of the Arcturians. I knew it. I saw it in your eyes immediately.
Those blue lights, maybe.
I know. I looked in her eyes. We're sitting in front of a resort in St. Augustine, and I sat down next to her. I looked in her eyes and I said, oh, you're related to the Arcturians. And your response was, I've been told that before. That was it. Boom.
That was done.
Boom. Yeah. Just that fast.
Just
you know, and Linny and I came together as she had just lost her mother and was so devastated and seeking solace and comfort, and found me online and wrote to me in a little chat box and message on Facebook. And I immediately connected with her. Instant.
It's amazing.
I know this woman. I know this woman's heart. This woman is pure of heart. Okay, y'all right. So we need to wrap up. Fine. Be that way.
We love you, Bill.
We love you all. Be the light you seek. We'll see you next week. Mwah. Good night, all.
Bye.